out there? This is Burrow, and we're going to learn how to play the... Wouldn't it be awesome if I sounded like that? Unfortunately, I don't, so you're stuck with me. Well, if you want to play like that guy at the beginning of this video, not going to happen. You're in the wrong place. Why? Because I can't play like that guy. Life happens. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is going to be a Basics on Bass course. We're going to offer several YouTube videos. Try to keep them between 5 and 10 minutes each. And again, my goal is not to make you into a professional touring musician, because quite frankly, most of us are not that. Most of us have day jobs, like me. But I just want to give you the basics, so when, whether you're in your own band or whether you're playing at church or you just want to goof around, you have the tools you need to get you where you want to go. So, shockingly, Basics on Bass, we're going to talk about the bass. I could get into a whole lot of tools and techniques and learn riffs and fills and so on and so forth. Let's start really basic for the first lesson though, and let's just go over the instrument. Bass guitar. You can see them these days. They have anywhere from 4 strings to 6 strings. Some are made really high up for soloing, things like that. Your general bass is going to have either 4 strings or 5 strings. For the 5 strings, it has a low B added into the normal 4, which are E, A, D, and G. Don't worry, we're going to go over a lot of these things, much more depth. I just want to give you an overview so we start on the same sheet of music. So let's start at, no pun intended, let's start at the top of the bass. This part up here, this is called the headstock. And typically the manufacturer will have their information up here on the headstock. It's actually a separate piece of wood from the neck. If you look real close, it's not going to show up in the video. But if you look at a bass real close, you can see there's a slight transition typically between the neck and the headstock. Separate piece of wood, probably the most fragile part of the bass, so the bass you'd want to keep the safest. Make sure like nothing smashes into it. What's on the headstock are the tuners. These are called tuners. You basically would wrap, if you were replacing the strings, you'd wrap the strings around the tuner, and this is how you, shockingly, tune the bass. Kind of crazy how that works. This is your neck for your bass, and it's a wooden neck. Inside the neck is a piece of metal called a truss rod. That's what holds the neck straight, because the neck is under a fair amount of tension, because you have these strings that exert a fair amount of tension on the neck, want to pull the neck this way. The truss rod is what keeps the neck nice and straight. You'll also hear people talk about, hey, my neck is bowed, or the neck is this. I'm going to have the bass set up, is the word they use. A lot of times that means adjusting the truss rod. This Music Man is a real nice example of a bass that has a truss wheel. So all I have to do is stick an Allen wrench in there, and I can make my neck go this way or my neck go that way, affect the action. Like we talked about, we're going to have, on this bass, we have 5 strings. We have a low B, an E, an A, a D, and a G. Had to let one of them ring out. Going further down, this part is the body of the bass. That's generally speaking what is vibrating into the pickups, which is giving you your sound. You'll hear all sorts of people get all wound up about what type of wood the body is made of. We'll go through all that later. Quite honestly, at the end of the day, most basses sound pretty much the same. So these people online who are talking like, dude, you gotta have alder, or man, basswood is gnarly. You know what? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter unless you're playing professionally. And until somebody's gonna pay me to play, I'm gonna play what I like. What you see here, this black piece within the bass, is called the pick guard. Nobody really uses a pick anymore, but the term came from the old days when people used to use picks, and it would protect the finish of the bass. Moving on down, this Music Man has one pickup. This is the pickup. So as the bass, as the string vibrates, the pickup, shockingly, is picking up that vibration. That's changing it from a vibration into a musical note. This is called a humbucker pickup. Don't ask me how they got the name humbucker, but I don't know, quite honestly. But it's a single humbucker pickup. These little pieces in there are called poles. Different style pickups will actually sound different. A humbucker does sound different than like a jazz bass. So like the Music Man will sound different than a jazz bass which has 2 single coil pickups. So single coil is one here and then one down here. This is a humbucker where they're together. You'll also see a precision bass, which is called a split coil pickup. All sorts of variations on those, and we'll talk about those a lot later, and we'll get into depth on some of the differences. But again, it's going to come down to personal preference. Moving further down the bass, we have our bridge. And this is where, if you could see, if I were to take the bass apart, this is what holds the strings onto the bass, part of it. So you actually, when you're putting in new strings, you put the strings through the bridge, run them all the way up, and then you put them into the tuners and get it tuned. I'll show you all that later, no problem whatsoever. Again, different styles of bridge, and people will swear online like, oh, you gotta have this style of bridge, you gotta have that style of the bridge. At the end of the day, whatever floats your boat, it really doesn't matter. Down here, these are your, they can be volume adjustment. On the Music Man that I play, one's for volume, one's for bass, one's for mid-level, one's for treble. You'll see basses that have about 9 million different knobs for a whole bunch of different things. Again, I'm fairly simplistic. That's why I play a single pickup bass. Other basses have multiple humbucker pickups. And again, they'll have all sorts of different, they call these tone knobs or volume knobs, or you'll hear some people call them pots, P-O-T-S. That's for the potentiometer, which actually, is an engineering term that changes the, I believe it's voltage as you move it back and forth, which is going to change it. The final thing we'll talk about real quick in the setup of the bass is a pickup switch. So again, I have a humbucker pickup, which is actually 2 pickups kind of smushed together. That's a official term, smushed together. So I can change from playing the bridge to playing both together to playing the neck pickup. And again, we'll talk about all that. You'll hear people talk about, well, play it on the bridge pickup, play it on the neck pickup, it sounds different, that sounds different, so on and so forth. We'll go through all of that. But that is a very generic statement that will take you all the way from the top of the bass to the bottom of the bass that has the parts. One more thing I do want to talk about though on the bass, you'll hear people talk about strap locks or strap pins. That's these little things right here, and I don't know if you can see them very well on the bass. So this is where your strap goes. These happen to be strap locks, which I would strongly recommend if you play standing up at all. I think they're $13. And one piece goes on your bass, one piece goes on your strap. They actually lock the strap to the bass. I can honestly say I've never seen a strap fall off of a bass, so it's not a huge deal, but you know what? If I can protect my investment a little bit better by investing, like I said, about $15 on Amazon for some strap locks, I'm probably gonna do that. I think that's money well spent. Let's flip over the bass real quickly. You'll hear people talk about neck through bass, bolt on neck, set neck, so on and so forth. All they're talking about is how the neck of the bass attaches to the body of the bass. You'll hear people call set necks, bolt on necks, glued on, neck through. This happens to be a bolt on bass. And again, I don't know how well we can see it, but you can see the neck is a different part than the body. And there's a cutout in the body that the neck fits into, and the neck is bolted on. If you took this off, you could actually make the neck into a separate piece. So say you'll see some people putting their own basses together, things like that. If you look at, Ibanez basses are your classic example, and there's other basses too that are neck through. If you see a solid piece of wood that goes all the way through the bass, that's called a neck through, and it's gonna have what are called wings. It's gonna have one piece of wing here, one piece of wing here, and again, you'll notice almost all of their natural finishes. You'll see the piece of wood that from the neck is one piece all the way from the top all the way to the bottom there, and that's what's called a neck through. And again, people will swear, oh my God, this is the best style bass. Oh my God, how could you play that? Only a monkey would play that. At the end of the day, it's your style, your taste, your playing. Try a bunch of different ones, whatever works out for you. On some of the basses, like this Music Man, you'll see a little battery compartment. You hear people talk about the term preamp or active electronics versus passive electronics. This is an example of a bass that has active electronics. What that means, and the way to tell the difference, is anything that has active electronics is going to have a little battery compartment here and back. This happens to be 9-volt active electronics. You'll see some of these. I think the new Marcus Miller basses and some other ones will have 2 battery compartments, and that's an 18-volt preamp. Again, is one better than the other? No, it's just different. So don't get hung up on, oh my God, mine is passive, and like, oh my God, he's got an active. Did you like that millennial? Was that good? I don't know, would a teenage girl really play bass though? Could I be like, oh my God, it's a bass, and it's, well, anyway. I digress, my apologies. So that is essentially the bass from the top to the bottom. When we go into the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about how to hold the bass. We can do it from a sitting position and also from a standing position, and we'll talk about what to do with your hands. Obviously we have a right hand and a left hand, so we're going to go through those, but I want to keep these lessons very basic. I don't want this to turn into, a 4-hour class on how to play the bass guitar. I'm going to give you from the start, give you some basics, and then we'll work through 1 hand, 2 hand, and then once we get into that, we'll actually get into how do you play the bass, what are the notes I should play, and when should I play those. But until next time, I hope you had a fantastic time learning a little bit more about the bass from Burl on bass.